Today we'll be taking a look at the Kohler Wellworth and Highline Accuflush Flushometer bowls, or as I like to personally call them, pressure lights on Flushometer, because that's essentially what these are. These would be introduced around 2006 and made up until circa 2018 when they will be replaced with the Wellcomme and Highcliff Ultras. The Wellworth Accuflush is basically the standard height version, which is this example right here, even though it's in a handicapped stall for some reason. Meanwhile, the Highline is comfort height. Sometimes it can be hard to compare the two considering that it doesn't look that much taller compared to the Wellworth. These are some toilets that you would expect to do pretty well, but then you're kind of disappointed that they don't do as well as you expect them to. Let's take a look at these toilet bowls and see what went wrong with them. As you can tell, the overall design is very plain. It's like any modern Kohler Flushometer bowl. It's nothing to write home about. The trapway opening is similar to the Kohler Pressure Lites of the modern era, made from 2005 onwards. It's practically identical, although sometimes the consistency can be all over the place, as with this one. Let's have a look at a flush. It is very plain, honestly, although sometimes you can get these to swirl. One of the biggest problems with these toilets is the inconsistent and crappy quality controls. They are all over the place, from inconsistent flushes, performances, bowl rinses, pulling factors even. It's such a mess. Let's first talk about the pulling factor. You would think it would be fine, right? It really isn't. It's very inconsistent. You can find two of these same toilets with the same exact pressure. One of them pulls things down fine, the other one struggles to get things past its 2 1/4 inch trapway, which honestly is quite ridiculous. Again, the inconsistencies are all over the place with these toilets. This issue also continues with the performance. You would think it would do pretty well considering it has a decently sized trapway in its 2 1/4 inches, and actually looks decently sized from the opening to the trapway passages. Well, disappointingly, it's very mixed. Sometimes you'll find one that performs pretty well, other times you'll find one that is occasionally clogged. While it's better than the 1.28 Kingston or the Kohler Highcrest, to say that the performance is a little bit disappointing is kind of an understatement, given what it is. Now let's have a look at bowl rinse. Disappointingly, though it looks good, it's kind of bad. Again, the rim jets being slightly misangled or the quality control not being as good for the rim jets is probably the biggest problem. Then again, the pressure lights never really had that great of bowl rinse either way, especially if it's on 1 gallon, but still, you would expect better for something like this. And that is the Kohler Wellworth and Highline Accuflush Flushometer bowls. Very disappointing if you ask me. You would expect these to be a lot better than they actually are, but disappointingly, their poor quality, especially with quality control, is the biggest problem, making these very inconsistent, which is kind of a letdown if you think about it. But let's put these toilets into the grading scale. Let's grade it. Yep, the bowl looks exactly the same as other modern Kohler Flushometer toilets. It looks painfully generic. I gave the others a 4, I'm giving this one a 4 too. We gotta talk about the messy quality control, cause it is one thing that ruins this toilet. It is complete and utter crap. You would think it would just only be like the rim jets being slightly crooked or misaligned, right? No, other things. Inconsistent pulling factors, inconsistent performances, inconsistent bowl rinse, and all the rest. We'll be talking about those categories later, but it is such a mess and I have to give it a 3. Consistency is a bit weird. Like, you can at least tell most of them are mostly consistent, but others are very weird. Sometimes they're slightly crooked, sometimes there's weird anomalies, and then other times you'll actually find ones that have smooth trapway openings, which is very weird. I have to give it a 6 at most. The trapway is decently sized, but as you'll soon find out, it doesn't mean everything. But by looks along, I'm giving it a 6. The flushes, like their pressure light counterparts, are nothing special. Occasionally you can see one swirl, but the flushes are generally nothing to write home about. The flush gets a 5. The pulling factors are not very good, like at all. They are very inconsistent. These things can be very inconsistent with their pulling factors. On one hand, you can find one that pulls things down perfectly fine. But then you go to another one that has the same exact pressure, and they struggle to get things past its opening. I don't know why that is. I don't know why these things are so inconsistent, considering that the pressure light versions are actually pretty consistent at pulling things down pretty good. But with these, they're cut in half, and they're not very good at all. I have to give it a 4. The performances are also pretty mixed. On one hand, you can find one that performs pretty well, then the next one over is clogged. Again, it's such a weird phenomenon, especially considering that the pressure light versions actually perform pretty good. But with these, they're pretty meh, which is kind of embarrassing considering they have 2 1/4 inch strapways, and actually look decently sized compared to something like the Kohler Highcrest, which, if you didn't know, it has the same exact trapway size, but of course clogs more often. Again, the performances can be slightly disappointing sometimes, but in general, they are pretty middle of the road. In terms of performance, it's getting a 5. The bow rinses are not very good, which is not very surprising. Then again, the bow rinse on the pressure light versions are not the greatest either, so take it that as you will. With the problems of the quality control, it's not surprising that the bow rinse is not very good on this one either. The ramjets are slightly crooked and sometimes out of whack, and the application of the ramjets are not very great either. It's getting a 4. Considering the weird issues these have, the survivability is pretty mixed, so it's only appropriate to give this a 5. Now let's talk about the overall value of these toilets. To say that these things are a painful letdown is an understatement. There's just so much wasted potential here, and it's such a shame honestly, because the tank versions actually do fairly well, but these don't do well at all. In fact, they're painfully inconsistent. The flushes, the bow rinses, the performances, the pulling factors, not one thing is consistent with these models. And it's kind of a shame honestly, because there's so much potential with these models, but they ruined it because of one thing: the absolute crap quality control that these things have. Sometimes it's very important to note that quality control is a very important thing, and without it you get stuff like this. A gigantic mess of mediocrity. I'm not going to pretend they're the worst things in the world considering that the Kohler Highcrest and 1.6 Kingstons exist, but still, these toilets are quite a letdown. In terms of value, they're getting a 4. The final score of the Kohler Wellworth and Highline Accuflush Flushometer toilets is a 46 out of 100. It's honestly a shame these things are kind of mediocre, considering that these things had so much potential. But thanks to quality control, these things are kind of ruined. If only the execution was so much better.